Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Ms. Ingram. What is the legal authority by which a President can sui sponte decide to enforce or not enforce certain provisions of a law?
I'm not in the group of people who analyze the legal underpinnings of that, but it is, I will say as an administrator, it is not uncommon when there are large new, particularly information reporting related things.
I'm actually asking for the legal basis. Can you cite a case?
I'm probably the wrong person. I understand.
Well, you're an attorney.
There has been, but I have not done the analysis in these cases.
Well,
let's
simplify the analysis. Can a President unilaterally increase a fine that Congress set?
I'm sorry, I'm confused by
the question. It's not a trick question. Can any chief executive unilaterally increase a fine or a statutory maximum?
I don't know of any example of that.
So the answer would be no.
I hesitate to respond for all of the agencies and all of the statutes on the book.
Just despite the fact that I'm a lawyer too, I'm going to say trust me. The answer to that question is no. You can't. You can't decide that we think the maximum for burglary should be life instead of 30 years, so we're going to sentence somebody to 40 years. You can't do that.
I understand, sir.
All right. And you would also agree a President cannot unilaterally suspend a mandatory minimum. If the law says you have to spend 5 years in prison for a 924C violation, a President can't just decide he doesn't like that law and suspend it, correct?
Again,
it's not a trick question. It's not even a legal question. It's more of a civics question.
I'm trying to get my head around the parameters of the question,
Mr. Gowdy, would you let a layperson intersect for a moment?
If the gentleman would be gracious enough to toll my time.
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
As a layperson.
Yes, thank you.
In your 31 years at the IRS, have you ever looked at the letter of the law on which you are executing IRS requirements and then seen an executive order that is inconsistent with that and gone with the executive order? In other words, do you ever consider as a lawyer and as a 31-year professional that the President can usurp IRS law or regulation through executive order? I didn't say fill in the gaps. I said usurp, go contravene existing law.
Would the Chairman indulge me in taking that in two parts?
That would be the gentleman from South Carolina's decision.
My time's being told.
Not anymore. I'm done.
Well,
may I respond?
You may.
Thank you. The executive order President part I don't understand in the question, but let me put that aside. I will say it is not uncommon in my 31 years, particularly when a statute is new or particularly when the constituency is having logistical operational problems meeting their obligation under a statute, that the IRS has given people either additional time, an additional year, or tried to tailor on a temporary basis what people have to do with that statute.
And my question is, what is the legal basis for that? What is the legal basis? Have you ever seen an instance when an executive unilaterally increased the marginal tax rate?
No. Increase? No.
So you will agree that there are certain categories where the executive can't change the law, even if the executive may not agree with the law.
It's never a question of whether we agree with the law. The law, that's not irrelevant to the decision. The question is, and particularly in the information reporting area, that I'm
not talking about information reporting. I'm talking about a statute passed by Congress, and I want the legal authority by which an executive can decide which portions of that law he or she wants to enforce and which provisions of that law that executive sui sponte decides not to enforce.
If there is any variation from the bare letter of the statute, it is never a single person, and it always includes legal analysis by someone, not me.
Well, the most recent legal analysis from the Department of Justice is only if an executive believes that a law is unconstitutional, i.e. DOMA, can he or she refuse to enforce it? I want to read an exchange to you back when the President from time to time did get difficult questions from the media. So we're going to go back a while, but I want to read an exchange where he was asked this question. People question your legal and constitutional authority to delay the employer mandate. Did you consult with your lawyer? And this was the President's response. If you heard me on stage today, what I said was I will seize any opportunity I can to work with Congress to strengthen the middle class, improve their prospects, improve their security, but where Congress is unwilling to act, I will take whatever administrative steps I can in order to do right by the American people. I did not hear a legal authority for suspending the law. I heard a political justification. Did you hear a legal authority in his response?
I don't know anything about his response, sir.
Well, I just read it to you. Did you hear a legal justification for suspending certain provisions of the law?
I only heard what you read. It speaks for itself. I can't really interpret it.
Can you cite me a legal justification for determining which portions of a law you want to summarily turn off and turn on?
I'm not familiar with anything in the way that we administer the tax code where we would be changing things in the way that you previously mentioned, changing a tax rate, increasing a tax amount, reducing a tax amount. The situations in which I've been involved, both in ACA and prior to ACA over the years, have had to do with taking into account requests from the community who need more time or more logistical help in meeting their obligations under the
So your testimony is there is no provision of the ACA which was passed by Congress that is not being implemented precisely as it was passed by Congress. Is that your testimony?
As we understand it to be passed by Congress.
What does that mean, as we understand it?
I respect.
Have you failed to meet any deadlines? Has any portion of the ACA as passed not been implemented on the timetable under which it was passed?
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady may answer.
Thank you, Chairman. There are several provisions where, at the request of the taxpayer community, we have taken into account their need to have delayed phase-in of provisions passed by Congress. I would point you to the W-2 provisions, which were logistical administrability requests from the community, and the information filing requirements for employers and insurers were based on extensive and persuasive requests from them that they needed more time to arrange their data and build their systems. The actual employer tax can't be figured out without some of that reporting.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent to ask just one more question because something in her response prompted another question.
Without objection, so ordered.
You said you had heard from the taxpayer community. I'm not familiar with that entity in our tripartite branch of government. How about Congress? My question is, what is the role of Congress when the executive decides he or she wants to sui sponte, not enforce a provision of law heretofore passed? Not the taxpayer community. What's the role of Congress?
Congress, from time to time, will enact statutes with due respect to this body that the community tells us are difficult to administer on that exact time frame. We try to listen to the community. We do not always do what they ask, but where it's reasonable to us and we think that it's a temporary accommodation and does not do lasting damage to the actual enactment of Congress and the ongoing implementation and phase-in of the law, we will take their views into consideration. And we take very seriously our obligation to listen to that community as part of our job.
Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time. I just find it stunning. I literally found that answer stunning, and it's hard to stun me that an executive branch entity would not enforce the law because some constituency group decided it was hard to implement it. That is not the way this works. Either Congress changes it or you live with the consequences of it. But can you imagine the community just deciding they didn't like some other provision of our criminal code being enforced? Can you imagine that, Mr. Chairman? I just found that response to be stunning, but I'm out of time.
Mr. Gowdy.